Commander Eric Shaw stared at the main view screen of his ship, the EDF Guardian. His hands gripped the armrests of his command chair so tightly that his knuckles turned white. What he was seeing couldn't be real. But it was. The human colony on Proxima Centauri, home to 15,000 men, women, and children, was being destroyed before his eyes. Bright flashes of light covered the planet's surface as alien ships rained down destruction from orbit. The colony had no military defenses. These were farmers, scientists, teachers, and their families. "Get me a channel to those ships," Shaw ordered, his voice steady despite the rage building inside him. "Sir, they're not responding to any of our hails," replied Communications Officer Amy Reeves. "We've tried all frequencies and protocols." The Guardian had been on a routine patrol when they picked up the distress signal. They arrived too late to stop the attack, and their small patrol vessel was no match for the 5 massive warships now orbiting the colony. "Record everything," Shaw said. "Every second, every detail. I want all sensor data at maximum resolution." "Already on it, sir," said Lieutenant Joe Winters at the science station. "But sir, the energy readings. I've never seen weapons like these before." Shaw nodded grimly. The alien ships were unlike any he had encountered in his 15 years of service. They were angular, with sharp edges that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. No markings, no identifiable features beyond their aggressive posture. "Sir, I'm detecting a transmission between their ships," Amy said suddenly. "It's encrypted, but I'm running it through the translator." A few seconds later, a harsh, clicking language filled the bridge. The computer struggled to translate, but eventually words appeared on the screen. "Primary objective complete. No survivors detected. Proceed to secondary target." Shaw felt sick. No survivors. 15,000 people gone in minutes. "They're turning toward us," Winters warned. "Sensors indicate their weapons are charging." "Evasive maneuvers," Shaw ordered. "Get us out of here. Maximum speed. Set course for Earth." The Guardian shuddered as its engines pushed to full power. The alien ships followed but seemed unwilling to pursue them beyond the edge of the Proxima Centauri system. Why aren't they following? Shaw wondered aloud. "Maybe they got what they wanted," Amy suggested quietly. During the 3-week journey back to Earth, Shaw barely slept. He reviewed the sensor data countless times, trying to understand what had happened and why. The aliens had been methodical, precise. This wasn't random violence. It was planned extermination. The ship's computer identified the attackers as Voraxians, a species humans had only encountered in passing. Previous interactions had been limited to brief trading exchanges at neutral stations. There had been no signs of hostility, no warnings. When the Guardian reached Earth, Shaw was immediately summoned to the United Earth Council chamber in Geneva. 12 council members sat in a semicircle, their faces grave as Shaw presented his evidence. "The colony is gone," he concluded. "Complete destruction. And based on the Voraxian communication we intercepted, they have other targets planned." The council chamber erupted into argument. "We must strike back immediately," insisted Councilor Ryan Davis, the representative from North America. "This is an act of war." "We don't have the military strength to engage an unknown enemy," countered Councilor Maria Gonzalez from South America. "We need more information before we act." Shaw watched the debate unfold with growing frustration. While they argued, more colonies could be at risk. "Commander Shaw," said Council President Diane Carter, silencing the others. "Your recommendation." Shaw straightened his shoulders. "Madam President, Council members, I recommend we prepare for war while seeking to understand our enemy. But make no mistake, the Voraxians attacked without provocation and without mercy. They will do so again. We need to be ready." The council continued debating long into the night. Shaw stood firm. The images of the destroyed colony burned into his memory. Whatever the Voraxians wanted, whatever their reasons, humanity would not go quietly into extinction. Of that he was certain. Lieutenant Kate Miller worked through the night in the dimly lit intelligence center beneath Geneva. Screens surrounded her, displaying star maps and data streams. For 3 days straight, she had barely eaten or slept. Something about the Voraxian attack didn't add up. "You're still here?" asked her supervisor, Major Sam Bennett, as he entered with 2 cups of coffee. Kate accepted one gratefully. "The Proxima attack wasn't random," she said. "I've been comparing it with other incident reports from our outer colonies." She pulled up 4 star maps side by side. Red markers blinked on each one. "These are all human outposts that reported communication failures in the past 6 months," she explained. "At the time, we thought they were technical issues." Sam leaned closer, his brow furrowed. "You think they were attacks?" "I do now. Look at the patterns." Kate tapped commands, and lines connected the outposts, forming a clear boundary. "All these outposts are along the same sector of space. They form a line exactly where our territory meets unexplored regions." "Why didn't we know about this sooner?" Sam asked. "Because the Voraxians were careful. Until Proxima, they'd made the attacks look like accidents or equipment failures. Commander Shaw only caught them because he arrived during the attack." Sam straightened up. "I need to take this to the council immediately." Within hours, the council reconvened. Kate presented her findings to the 12 grim-faced leaders. "Based on the evidence, we believe the Voraxians have been systematically eliminating human presence in this sector for at least 6 months," she concluded. "The total death toll may be over 20,000 colonists." The room fell silent. Council President Diane Carter finally spoke. "What do you believe their objective is, Lieutenant?" "Territory, Madam President. They're clearing humans from what they consider their space. The pattern suggests they're establishing a boundary." Commander Shaw, who had been called back for the meeting, stood up. "We need to act now. Send the fleet to protect our remaining colonies." President Carter nodded. "Already done, Commander. But we're also dispatching diplomatic envoys to establish communication. We need to understand why they're doing this." 3 days later, the envoys returned with surprising news. The Voraxians had agreed to talk. The message played in the council chamber. "Humans have encroached on territory claimed by the Voraxian collective. Our actions were necessary to protect our interests. We offer terms. Withdraw all human presence from the disputed sector, and hostilities will cease. This is generous, except within 7 rotations." "That's it?" Shaw asked incredulously. No acknowledgement of the lives lost. No explanation for why they didn't simply contact us before attacking. "They see this as a border dispute," explained Dr. Greg Watson, the xenolinguist who had helped translate the message. "Their culture doesn't value communication with lesser species until they prove worthy of notice." "And how did we prove worthy?" asked Counselor Gonzalez. "By surviving and fighting back at Proxima," Dr. Watson said. "Commander Shaw's actions showed them we aren't as weak as they thought." Kate studied the star map again. The disputed sector contained 5 established colonies and numerous mining operations. Thousands of lives and years of human effort. "They're offering a truce on their terms," she said, "with no justice for those already killed." President Carter stood, her face resolute. "Send our response. The United Earth Council acknowledges the Voraxian communication. We are willing to discuss border delineation, but we require explanation and reparation for unprovoked attacks on peaceful colonies. 20,000 human lives demand justice." Shaw turned to Kate. "They won't accept that. They don't think like us." "No," she agreed. "But we can't think like them either. We're human. Justice matters to us." The room grew quiet as they waited for the Voraxian response, each person wondering if they had just chosen war over an unjust peace. The Voraxian response arrived faster than anyone expected. It was brief and dismissive. "Human concepts of justice are irrelevant. Accept our terms or face consequences. You have 5 rotations to decide." The Earth Council chamber erupted into chaos. Half the members argued for immediate acceptance of the Varaxian terms, citing the need to protect remaining colonies. The other half demanded a stronger response, unwilling to abandon their people or forget those already lost. "We cannot bow to threats," insisted Councillor Davis, pounding his fist on the table. "If we give up these colonies, what will they demand next? And if we refuse, how many more will die?" Countered Councillor Gonzalez. "We aren't ready for an interstellar war." Admiral Frank Howard, the silver-haired head of Earth's defense fleet, had been silent during the debate. Now he stood, commanding immediate attention with his presence alone. "Council members," he said, his deep voice filling the room, "I've spent 40 years defending human interests in space. In my experience, showing weakness to an aggressor only invites more aggression. The Varaxians attacked without warning. They killed thousands. Now they expect us to retreat with our tails between our legs." "What do you suggest, Admiral?" asked President Carter. "Prepare for war while continuing diplomacy. Show strength, not fear. The Varaxians respect power. Let's show them ours." Before anyone could respond, the chamber doors opened. A woman walked in, her steps determined despite her obvious exhaustion. Dr. Olivia Patel, one of Earth's leading xenobiologists, had lost her husband in the Proxima attack. "Madam President, Council members," she said, "I request permission to speak." President Carter nodded, and Olivia took a deep breath. "My husband, Alan, died helping families evacuate when the Varaxians attacked. He believed in peaceful coexistence with alien species. He dedicated his life to understanding others." Her voice broke slightly, but she continued, "I want peace too. But peace without justice isn't peace. It's surrender." The room fell silent. "I've studied the Varaxians for years," she continued. "They respect strength and despise what they see as weakness. If we accept their terms without demanding accountability, they won't see it as a peaceful resolution. They'll see it as confirmation that humans are weak and unworthy of respect." "What would you have us do, Dr. Patel?" asked Councillor Gonzalez gently. "Hold them accountable. Demand a neutral tribunal to assess these attacks as war crimes. Show them that humans have laws and principles that matter to us." Admiral Howard nodded in agreement. "The doctor is right. The Varaxians need to understand that for humans, justice isn't optional." President Carter considered their words. The weight of billions of human lives rested on her decision. "We will respond as follows," she finally said. "Earth is willing to discuss territorial boundaries and consider the Varaxian claims. However, we require a tribunal with neutral third-party witnesses to assess the attacks on our colonies. We will consider a truce only after the responsible parties are held accountable for the lives lost." Admiral Howard straightened. "I'll begin preparations for defensive operations. If the Varaxians reject our terms, we need to be ready." The response was sent, and Earth held its breath. Ships were mobilized, colonies fortified, and civilians evacuated from the most vulnerable outposts. Commander Shaw was assigned to coordinate defense strategies with Lieutenant Miller's intelligence team. 3 days later, the Varaxian answer arrived. "Human concept of tribunal is primitive ritual. War criminals are determined by victors. If you insist on this demand, you choose conflict. Prepare yourselves." President Carter read the message aloud to the council. No one spoke for several long moments. "So be it," she finally said. "Admiral Howard, initiate Defense Protocol Alpha. We will not abandon our principles, even in the face of superior force." As the council members filed out, Dr. Patel approached Commander Shaw. "Was this the right choice?" she asked quietly. Shaw looked at her steadily. "The right choice is rarely the easy one, Doctor. But I believe history will show that today, humanity stood for something worth fighting for." Captain Lisa Diaz checked her equipment one last time. Her stealth suit fit perfectly, designed to mask not just her visual presence, but also her heat signature and bioelectric field. 5 other soldiers dressed in identical gear stood ready in the small craft's loading bay. "Listen up," she said. "This mission is simple but dangerous. We get in, gather intel, and get out. No heroics, no engagement unless absolutely necessary." Admiral Howard had named the mission Operation Nemesis after the Greek goddess of retribution. While Earth prepared for full-scale conflict, they needed more information about their enemy. Sergeant Paul Wright, Diaz's second-in-command, nodded grimly. "The Varaxians won't know what hit them." Their ship, the EDF Phantom, was the newest stealth vessel in Earth's fleet. Its experimental cloaking technology had never been tested against Varaxian sensors, but it was their best hope of infiltrating enemy territory undetected. "Approaching the outer perimeter of the target," announced the pilot. "Stealth systems at maximum capacity." The target was a Varaxian outpost on a small moon orbiting a gas giant. Intelligence suggested it served as a forward command center for operations in the disputed sector. "Any sign they've detected us?" Diaz asked. "Negative, Captain. Their patrol ships are maintaining standard routes." Diaz took a deep breath. "Take us in. Find us a blind spot to deploy." The Phantom glided silently through space, avoiding Varaxian patrol routes. They settled in a crater on the dark side of the moon, less than 2 kilometers from the outpost. "Comms check," Diaz said as her team prepared to disembark. Each member confirmed their communication systems were functioning. "Remember, we have 6 hours before the Phantom must reposition due to the moon's rotation. Miss that window, and we're stranded." They moved across the airless surface in practiced formation, using the rough terrain for cover. The Varaxian outpost loomed ahead, its angular architecture even more menacing up close. "Look at the size of those weapon emplacements," whispered Wright over the comm. "They could take out a colony ship with one shot." "Focus on the mission," Diaz replied. They reached an access point where cooling pipes emerged from the structure. The team's engineer, Corporal Ben Foster, examined the security measures. "Basic thermal alarm system. I can loop it," he said, attaching a small device to the pipes. "We should have about 20 minutes before their systems might notice the pattern." Inside, the team moved quickly through maintenance tunnels. The air was uncomfortably hot and filled with a strange metallic smell. They reached a junction where Diaz consulted the rough map they had pieced together from satellite imagery. "Command center should be 2 levels up. Let's move." They encountered their first Varaxian guard at the next intersection. The alien was taller than any human, with scaled skin that shifted color slightly as it moved. Its 4 eyes constantly scanned the corridor, though it seemed unaware of the invisible intruders. The team froze, relying on their stealth technology. After what seemed like an eternity, the guard moved on. "That was close," whispered Foster. They reached the command center's outer section and found an access terminal. While the others stood guard, Foster connected a translation and data mining device to the Varaxian computer. "This could take several minutes," he warned. As the device worked, Diaz surveyed the room. The walls were covered with star maps showing human colonies marked with what appeared to be targeting data. Suddenly, Foster gasped. "Captain, you need to see this." The data streaming across his portable screen showed communication logs, battle plans, and strategic assessments. "They'd been studying us for years," he said. "The attacks weren't about territory at all. They were tests, experiments to assess our military capabilities and response times." Wright looked over his shoulder. "There's more. Look at this contingency plan. It's dated after their truce offer." Diaz read the translated text and felt a chill. The document detailed plans for a full invasion of human space once Earth agreed to withdraw from the disputed sector. "The truce was a lie," she said. "They never intended peace. They wanted us to weaken our position so they could launch a larger attack." An alarm suddenly blared. Red lights flashed throughout the complex. "We've been detected," Foster said. "The stealth field must have faltered. Download what you can and wipe the rest," Diaz ordered. "We need to get this information back to Earth." Heavy footsteps approached from multiple directions. They were surrounded. New plan, Dias said. Right, you and I will create a diversion. Foster, get that data to the Phantom no matter what. Earth needs to know the truth. Gunfire echoed through the United Earth Council chamber as Captain Dias's mission recording played on the main screen. The footage showed her and Sergeant Wright fighting off Voraxian guards, while Corporal Foster escaped with the critical data. The recording ended with Dias's voice. If you're seeing this, Foster made it out. The Voraxians plan to trick us into retreating, then launch a full invasion. Their truce offer was a lie. Don't trust them. Dias out. Silence filled the chamber when the screen went dark. Captain Dias and Sergeant Wright had been captured. Foster had barely escaped, his shuttle taking heavy damage during the flight back to human space. Admiral Howard stood and faced the council. The evidence is clear. The Voraxians never intended peace. They were testing our strength, planning our destruction all along. President Carter's face was grim. Captain Dias and Sergeant Wright sacrificed themselves to bring us this information. We won't waste it. She turned to the council members who had previously advocated for accepting the Voraxian terms. None would meet her eyes. I call for a vote, she said. Earth must present a united front against this threat. For the first time since the crisis began, the vote was unanimous. Earth would fight. Admiral Howard activated a holographic display showing Earth's defense systems and fleet positions. Project Aegis is ready, he announced. Over the past weeks, Earth's scientists and engineers had worked around the clock to develop defenses against Voraxian weapons. Dr. Patel had been central to this effort, her knowledge of Voraxian biology, helping create shields specifically tuned to their energy signatures. The EDF retribution will lead our response, Howard continued. Commander Shaw will take command. Shaw stepped forward, now wearing the insignia of a fleet captain. The Retribution is the first ship equipped with our new shield and weapon systems. We've assembled a fleet of 50 ships, with more being upgraded daily. Lieutenant Miller joined him at the display. Based on the data Corporal Foster recovered, we've identified 3 key Voraxian bases in the disputed sector. We believe a coordinated strike on these targets will demonstrate our resolve without escalating to full-scale war. Our goal isn't conquest, Shaw added. We want to bring the Voraxians to real negotiations, not fake truces. Dr. Patel stepped forward. I've developed a new communication protocol that can break through Voraxian encryption. This will allow us to broadcast evidence of their deception to all their systems simultaneously. President Carter nodded. The Voraxians thought they could test us, trick us, and then conquer us. They were wrong. She addressed the entire council. Let this be clear. Humans don't want war. We wanted, and still want, peaceful coexistence with all species. But we will not be slaughtered. We will not be deceived. And we will have justice for those we've lost. Preparation for the mission took 3 intense weeks. The fleet gathered in Earth orbit, the largest military force humans had ever assembled. Each ship received the upgrades developed by Dr. Patel's team. On the bridge of the Retribution, Shaw reviewed the mission parameters one last time. His ship would lead the primary assault on the largest Voraxian base, while other fleet elements targeted the remaining installations. Status report, he ordered. All systems green, reported his first officer. The fleet is in formation and ready. Shaw looked at the tactical display. The plan was sound, but combat was always unpredictable. They had one chance to show the Voraxians that humans were not to be underestimated. Send the message to all ships, Shaw said. Operation Justice begins in 30 minutes. As the countdown began, Shaw thought of the colonists who had died at Proxima Centauri and the other outposts. He thought of Captain Dias and Sergeant Wright, likely being tortured in some Voraxian prison. He thought of all the peaceful human settlements now living in fear. For Earth, he said quietly as the fleet began to move. The Retribution's engines glowed blue as it led the fleet toward the jump point. Humanity was going to war not for conquest or revenge, but for justice. The Voraxians had wanted a truce on their terms. They were about to learn that humans had terms of their own. The EDF Retribution emerged from its jump with weapons ready. Blue energy rippled across its hull as the new shield systems activated. 49 ships followed, taking formation in the space above the main Voraxian base. No immediate response, reported the sensor officer. They weren't expecting us. Shaw nodded. The element of surprise was critical to their plan. Begin Phase 1, he ordered. Target their communication arrays and weapon platforms only. The human fleet opened fire in perfect coordination. Beams of concentrated energy struck the Voraxian base with surgical precision. On the tactical display, Shaw watched as the alien defenses flickered and failed under the assault. "Sir, we're detecting ships launching from the surface," the tactical officer announced. "As expected," Shaw replied. "All ships, maintain discipline. Follow the engagement protocols." The Voraxian response was chaotic. Their ships rushed to meet the human fleet, but they weren't in proper formation. They hadn't expected humans to strike first, or to strike with such coordinated force. "They're hailing us," the communications officer said with surprise. "Put them through," Shaw ordered. A Voraxian commander appeared on screen. Its scaled face showed what Shaw recognized as shock. "Humans, this unprovoked attack." Shaw cut the alien off. "This is Captain Eric Shaw of Earth Defense Fleet. Your forces destroy our colonies without warning. You offered a false truce while planning invasion. We know the truth." The Voraxian's 4 eyes blinked rapidly. "How did you?" "Target their flagship," Shaw ordered, cutting the communication. "Disable, don't destroy." The Retribution's main weapons fired, striking the Voraxian flagship with pinpoint accuracy. Its engines went dark, leaving it drifting in space. "Sir, reports coming in from the other strike teams," his first officer announced. "Similar success at both targets. Minimal casualties on our side." At the same moment, Dr. Patel's voice came through on a secure channel from Earth. "Communication protocol activated, Captain. Broadcasting evidence to all Voraxian systems now." Across Voraxian space, their own people were seeing the evidence of their leader's deception. The plans for false peace followed by invasion, the calculated attacks on civilian colonies, the cold assessment of human lives as irrelevant. "Multiple Voraxian ships are powering down weapons," the tactical officer reported, surprise evident in his voice. "They're withdrawing." Shaw hadn't expected this. "Are they regrouping?" "No, sir. They appear to be standing down." The battle at Proxima Centauri, where Shaw had witnessed the colony's destruction, was now being reversed. Human ships reclaimed the system, setting up defensive positions around the devastated planet. Similar reports came in from the other strike teams. The Voraxians were falling back everywhere, their coordinated defense collapsing as quickly as it had begun. "Sir, new communication coming in," the officer reported. "It's from the Voraxian High Command, not the local forces." Shaw straightened his uniform. On screen, an older Voraxian appeared. Its scales faded to a pale gray. "I am Supreme Commander Vul of the Voraxian Collective. We request a cessation of hostilities." Shaw kept his face neutral. "Your forces attacked our colonies without provocation. You killed thousands of civilians. You planned invasion while offering false peace. There has been a misunderstanding," Vul said, clearly uncomfortable. "No misunderstanding," Shaw replied firmly. "We have your own records. Your own people are seeing them now." Vul's eyes widened. "How did you?" "Earth will consider ceasing hostilities under the following conditions," Shaw continued. "Immediate release of all human prisoners, including Captain Diaz and Surgeon Wright. Withdrawal of all Voraxian forces from disputed territories, and agreement to a neutral tribunal to assess the attacks on our colonies." The Voraxian commander seemed to shrink on screen. "These terms are non-negotiable," Shaw finished. "You wanted war. We want justice. You have 6 hours to respond." As the communication ended, Shaw turned to look at the tactical display. Human ships now controlled the space around all three Voraxian bases. For the first time, the aliens were on the defensive. "Send word to Earth," Shaw ordered. "Phase 1 complete. Awaiting further instructions." His first officer looked at him. "Do you think they'll agree to our terms?" Shaw thought about the destroyed colonies, the families lost, the plans for invasion he had seen. "They don't have a choice," he said quietly. "They thought we were weak. Now they know better." 5 days after the human victory, representatives from both species gathered on a neutral space station orbiting Ta City. The station belonged to the Galactic Commerce Guild, an organization that facilitated trade between various spacefaring civilizations. Susan Clark, Earth's lead negotiator, sat straight-backed at the conference table. A veteran diplomat with 30 years of experience, she had never faced a challenge like this one. Across from her sat Kraz Toll, the Voraxian diplomat. Behind him stood 2 guards, their scaled skin shifting colors with each movement. Also present were Admiral Howard, Commander Shaw, Dr. Patel, and Lieutenant Miller. On the Voraxian side, Supreme Commander Vool had joined the delegation, along with several military advisors. The room fell silent as Susan placed a small device on the table. It projected holograms of the destroyed human colonies. "Before we begin any discussion about borders or resources," she said firmly, "we must address these attacks. 20,000 human lives were lost. We require acknowledgement and accountability." Kraz Toll's 4 eyes blinked slowly. "Humans place strange value on individual lives," he said. "In Voraxian culture, strength determines worth. You were weak until you proved otherwise." Susan's expression didn't change. "We are not here to debate cultural values. We are here to establish that unprovoked attacks on civilian populations are unacceptable under any circumstances. The Voraxian collective acknowledges that our assessment of human capabilities was flawed." Kraz Toll replied carefully. "That's not good enough," Admiral Howard interrupted. "We want those responsible held accountable." Supreme Commander Vool leaned forward. "You must understand, humans. Our society values strength above all. We tested you, and initially, you failed. Now you have proven your strength. This changes your status." Dr. Patel, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "If I may," she said, "I studied Voraxian culture for years. They genuinely don't understand why we're upset about the loss of life. To them, this was a natural process of determining hierarchy." She turned to face Kraz Toll directly. "But you must understand this. To humans, each life has value. Each person who died had family, friends, hopes, and dreams. We don't measure worth by strength alone." For the first time, the Voraxian diplomat seemed unsettled. "This concept is difficult." "Nevertheless," Susan continued, "if you wish to have peaceful relations with humans, you must accept our terms. A joint tribunal to assess responsibility for the attacks, reparations to rebuild our colonies, and a monitored disarmament of Voraxian military in the disputed regions." Kraz Toll and Vool exchanged looks. "These terms are significant," the diplomat said. "They are non-negotiable," Susan replied. "And if we refuse?" asked Supreme Commander Vool. Commander Shaw spoke for the first time. "Then the temporary ceasefire ends. Our fleet stands ready. And now we know your weaknesses." The negotiations continued late into the night. The Voraxians resisted the idea of a tribunal, arguing that their commanders had simply followed their cultural norms. Susan remained firm, explaining that accountability was essential for humans to trust any future agreements. On the second day, Captain Diaz and Sergeant Wright joined the negotiations, having been released from Voraxian custody as a show of good faith. They provided first-hand accounts of the Voraxian deception, strengthening Earth's position. By the third day, both sides were exhausted. The Voraxians had conceded to most of Earth's demands, but one sticking point remained. "We cannot submit to your tribunal as described," Kraz Toll said. "Our leaders would lose all authority. Our society values strength. To show such submission would destroy our government from within. Susan considered this. Understanding alien cultures was always the most challenging aspect of her job. What if, she suggested, the tribunal included representatives from your own judicial system, alongside humans and neutral third parties? And what if those found responsible were permitted to make restitution according to Varaxian customs, provided those customs didn't violate basic rights? Krastal and Vul conferred quietly before responding. This compromise might be acceptable, the diplomat said finally. It would allow us to maintain face with our people while meeting your need for justice. Susan looked at Admiral Howard, who nodded slightly. Then we have the framework for an agreement, she said. Justice for the dead, and a foundation for future peace. As the meeting adjourned, Commander Shaw approached Captain Diaz. Was it worth it? He asked quietly. Diaz looked at the Varaxian delegation, then back to Shaw. They know now that humans aren't to be trifled with, she said, and they're learning that justice matters to us. That's 1 year after the negotiations. Admiral Eric Shaw stood on the observation deck of the newly built memorial on Proxima Centauri, where once a thriving colony had stood. Now a simple but powerful monument rose against the alien sky. The curved wall of dark stone held the names of every colonist who had died in the Varaxian attacks, etched in letters that would endure for centuries. Shaw had received his promotion 6 months ago, after overseeing the implementation of the security provisions in the Earth-Varaxian Treaty. Now he was here to speak at the memorial's dedication ceremony. Behind him, representatives from Earth, the Varaxian Collective, and 7 other alien civilizations were gathering. The events of the past year had changed humanity's standing in the galaxy. No longer seen as newcomers to be tested or ignored, humans were now recognized as a force deserving respect. Quite a view, isn't it? Dr. Olivia Patel joined him at the railing. She had been appointed as the head of the new interspecies cultural exchange program. I never thought I'd stand here again, Shaw admitted. Last time I was above this planet, I was watching it burn. And now we're rebuilding, she said, gesturing to the construction sites visible in the distance. The colony was being reestablished, this time with proper defenses and with Varaxian reparation funds. The Joint Tribunal had concluded its work 3 months ago. 5 high-ranking Varaxian military leaders had been found responsible for the attacks and were now serving sentences that included direct participation in reconstruction efforts. It was a unique punishment that satisfied both human needs for justice and Varaxian cultural values of strength through action. Is the council president ready? Shaw asked. Olivia nodded. She's reviewing her speech one last time. The Varaxian representatives are getting restless, though. They don't understand why we need to talk so much before doing things. Shaw smiled slightly. They're learning. The ceremony began with President Carter's address. She spoke of loss, justice, and the difficult path to genuine peace. When she finished, Supreme Commander Vul stepped forward. The old Varaxian had been one of the few leaders to keep his position after the tribunal, having been found to have opposed the deception strategy. Humans value words, Vul began awkwardly. Varaxians value actions. Today, we offer both. He gestured, and a group of young Varaxians came forward, each carrying a small tree native to Earth. In a carefully choreographed movement, they began planting the trees around the memorial. These will grow for 1,000 years, Vul continued, a living reminder that strength without wisdom leads to failure. We acknowledge our error in testing you through destruction. We will remember these lessons as we move forward as allies. The word clearly didn't come easily to him, but the effort was significant. Later, as the formal events concluded, Shaw found himself approached by Captain Lisa Diaz and Sergeant Paul Wright. They had been reassigned to lead security for the new human embassy on the Varaxian homeworld. How are our scaly friends treating you? Shaw asked. With a lot more respect than before, Diaz replied. They're still challenging, but they're listening now. That's all we ever wanted, Wright added. To be heard. to have our values recognized. As the crowd dispersed, Shaw noticed something unexpected. A small Varaxian child and a human child were standing together at the memorial wall. The human child, a girl of about 8, placed a flower at the base of the wall. After watching carefully, the Varaxian child did the same. President Carter joined Shaw as he observed this. "That's what this was all about," she said quietly. "Not just punishment or reparations, but building something better for them." Shaw nodded. "They wanted a truce to buy time. We wanted justice to build peace. And now we have both," she concluded. As the sun began to set on Proxima Centauri, casting long shadows across the memorial, Shaw thought about how close they had come to endless war. It would have been easier, in some ways, to simply fight until one side was destroyed. But humans had insisted on a harder path: justice, accountability, and then reconciliation. The two children were leaving now, walking side by side, different in almost every way, but moving in the same direction. Perhaps, Shaw thought, that was the most fitting memorial of all.